We have lots to discuss here in today's video, including lots more speculation for moves we could see here in the offseason. In today's rumor mill, we're taking a look at some deals possibly for the Toronto Maple Leafs, Montreal Canadiens, and the Chicago Blackhawks. Plus, is it possible that the Minnesota Wild and Kirill Kaprizov get to a point where they actually consider a trade and not a mega long-term extension? We're going to discuss an Athletic article discussing that possibility, what it would take for it to reach that point. Plus, we also have some free agent speculation around a player like Max Pacioretty, some potential destinations where he could end up. And did David Pastrnak actually have some shady comments, insults, if you will, towards Jerard Slafkovsky in a Slovakian interview? We'll discuss the comments he made and what it might mean coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss here today. Before we jump into a lot of the news, I just want to acknowledge a piece that we saw from the NHL Players Association today. Today actually would have been the 100th birthday of one of the all-time greats, Ted Lindsay. Of course, Ted Lindsay, mostly known for being a great player with the Detroit Red Wings, but was also instrumental in the creation of the players' union that we see today, and helping players make sure they're accommodated, and paid appropriately, and everything that the union security brings to them. So Ted Lindsay is just one of those creatures. Not only was he a great player, but just played such a huge role in everything else, and how his impact on the game will be felt for forever, really. So he would have been 100 years old today. So just wanted to acknowledge that birthday of the great Ted Lindsay and all the impacts that he's had on the NHL. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about a variety of topics here today. Let's start with an interesting story between. I came across this a couple days ago. Haven't had time to squeeze it into a video before today, but I kind of want to talk about it here a little bit. It was an interview with David Pastrnak. Seems innocent enough, but part of this interview, based on the translations, it sure looks like he may have taken a shot at Habs forward Jerard Slafkovsky. Now, how this even came up, why he was even asked about him, was interesting enough. So after reading through it, looking at the translation, and keep in mind, Google Translate is not perfect by any means. So sometimes, especially when it comes to when it comes to like using different words, whether it be like some things are sarcastic or jokes or different things that in different languages not always picked up and translated perfectly. So I caution you not to get too riled up over these comments, because like I said, the translation might not be perfect. And anytime we see European interviews where I have to translate with Google Translate, I always kind of move forward carefully, but they're fun to talk about anyways, and we'll see what everybody thinks here. So essentially, he's in Slovakia for a golf thing, and he's done an interview. In the interview, they cover a variety of topics, but then they get to a point where he's asked, obviously, but they refer to him as the biggest star in Czech hockey, and they say, in our country here in Slovakia, the biggest star is Habs forward Jerard Slafkovsky. Like, what are your thoughts on him? So he goes on to have a lot of good things to say, but then at the end, it seems like he takes a shot at him. But like I said, knowing Pasternak's personality, and wouldn't be surprising here if this was meant more as a lighthearted jab, if you will, not necessarily like a major insult, but essentially, he goes on to say that Jerard Slafkovsky is still a young player gaining experience this season. He said it was clear that he had a lot more to give to the team than the season before. He has a good physique, good in front of the net with skilled hands. I believe he'll continue to progress, which would be great for Slovak hockey. He just needs a little more humility. So, humility, basically, to me, that comment means he needs to be a little more humble, if you will, like modest, humble, which says that maybe he comes off as being a little cocky, and that maybe not a great role model for the youth, because that's kind of the other part, of that quote too, is that, needs to be good role model for the young players. So I guess with the way Slafkovsky plays on the ice, I guess we probably have seen maybe a few situations where maybe he can come across that way. Of course, off the ice, I don't know that Slafkovsky really is a cocky player. I don't know that that's really fair. I think there's been a few gestures and things that he's done on the ice, which maybe as a young player that's, not super established, might have come across that way. I don't know. But interesting to see that, we know that the Habs and Bruins have been rivals over the years. The rivalry is a little soft right now, given we haven't seen a playoff series in a number of years, and things are just different, right? They haven't really been at the top of their games at the same time here in a while, or had a recent playoff series to kind of heat things up again. But obviously they do see each other a lot because of being in the same division and all that. So obviously he would have played against them a number of times now in a couple of years that Slafkovsky's been in the league. So it's just interesting to me. I'd like to get your take on it. We can link the article in the pinned comment if you'd like, just to have a look at it. Because I just use Google Translate to kind of see how it, because I've seen in the last couple of days lots of people talking about, did you see the comments Pastrnak made about Slafkovsky? Looks like he took a shot at him. And, but it's hard to say the exact context. I don't want anybody getting all riled up, especially if you're a Montreal fan. Don't get too offended. But interesting just to see. Let me know what you think on these interesting comments down below in the comment section. So a bunch of other things we're going to look at today. Let's start with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, the Maple Leafs, of course, have been linked to Max Pacioretty still. There still seems to be a possibility that Pacioretty signs in Toronto, but there is a bunch of other teams reportedly in the mix. According to an article I was looking at today from the Hockey News, they have Max Pacioretty getting interest from about 5 different teams, including Detroit, Edmonton, the Rangers, the Leafs, and his former team where he was captain, the Montreal Canadiens. I'm going to say there's probably no chance that Montreal and Pacioretty are going to sign a contract. I would be shocked. To be honest, I think they have enough veteran guys there, that are doing their thing, that I don't think there's really any need to bring Pacioretty back. You've got Gallagher, you've got Anderson, they've got some guys that are playing third line minutes. They just let go Armia, Dvorak. So to me, they're kind of still a team that's, for the most part, got a lot of youth, and they've still got a few veterans around to kind of insulate them and whatnot. I just don't see the point with what the roster that they've got together, where it makes sense to bring Pacioretty in. With the Oilers and Red Wings, I can see maybe there's more of a fit there. The Oilers, especially where they lost Corey Perry in free agency, I think he could play a similar role for them that Perry did. So that kind of makes sense. Rangers, maybe, but I'm not so sure there. And then, like I said, Toronto, he could play a similar role that he did last year. If you look at the Leaf roster right now, there's definitely going to be some question marks in a few roster spots. You've got about, I'd say in the forward group of 12 players, you've got about maybe eight spots that are 8 to 9 that are kind of, you can probably pencil guys in or put it in pen so it's, secure. Your top line is going to be Matthews and Nyes, but who's going to play that other wing, right? Who's going to take the old spot that Marner had? The second line, you're probably going to have Tavares and Nylander, but who's going to be the second left wing, right? So there's a spot there that could open up. You got Nick Waz likely going to be your third line center. I suspect Joshua is going to play on that line. But again, who's going to be the other winger? Because you've got guys like Michelli, you've got Max Domi. But where does everybody fit? That's the question, right? Steven Lorentz has signed a 3-year contract. He's probably a shoe-in for the fourth line. But again, some guys like Järnkrok, Kampf, Nick Robertson, they've all got some question marks around them. They've been mentioned in the rumor mill here a fair bit. And part of the reason why Pacioretty hasn't signed with Toronto is the fact that they're trying to free up space. Now, they still doesn't mean they're going to sign him 100%, but they are one of the teams he's supposedly looking at. And we've talked about at length here that they'd want to move between Järnkrok and Kampf for sure. Maybe Robertson. There's a few of those guys that could go that would make room for a guy like Pacioretty. And then the other interesting thing, too, that I've seen talking on the Overdrive program with Brian Hayes and who was on with him today? I think it was Jonas and Dave Feshak. And they were talking about the Leaf lineup. And Hayes brings up a point. He doesn't think that it's a given that Bobby McMann is on the roster come the fall. Now, or at least if he's not necessarily saying for sure he's going to be traded, but that he's either that he could see him either being moved basically or not a regular in the lineup, so that he's not sure that he's going to have a full-time spot. So, like they mentioned how Joshua obviously has connection to Craig Berube, which made sense why the Leafs acquired him. Of course, Joshua played with the St. Louis Blues when Berube was there, so they know each other. Berube, he definitely seems to be a Berube kind of guy. There's no doubt about that. So I'm sure that there was a little Berube influence there, bringing him in from Vancouver. McMahon's got decent size, but he doesn't play physical. And yeah, he scored 20 goals last year, but he's had. I guess the way they were talking about how his streakiness and later in the year there was question marks about changing the lineup. Is McMahon a sure thing to be in the top 3 lines going into opening night, or could he be a player that either is the 13th forward or a player that they maybe move? Because we know that, like I said, they have guys like Domi, they have guys that they brought in like Michelli. They're going to have to slot them somewheres. But, again, it's hard to say exactly how the lines are done. And if they can find a way to upgrade, they will. So, obviously, they're not going to be having an easy time because it hasn't happened yet. We know that, Jarren Krok and Cam's contracts are going to be tough to move. That's for sure. But as McMahon, one of the guys that they could move too. Obviously he's had a decent run with them. Has he been streaky at times? Sure. Is he what you'd call a Berube guy? Not necessarily. I don't think Berube hates him or anything, but he's not, like I said, a guy that goes out there and he's not a power forward. He's not a big, strong, physical kind of guy. He's got decent size and everything, but he just doesn't play a big game, was the argument on Overdrive from Hayes. And to be honest, I think he's got some good points there. So just kind of want to get a feel from the Toronto fan base especially. Do you think there's a given here that McMahon is in the top 3 lines on opening night? Or could he also be a player that's considered as part of a package to try to find an upgrade for the top 2 lines? Or is it possible that maybe he's on the team, but he's, like the 13th forward or something like that? Let me know what you think on Bobby McMann. Now, on Kirill Kaprizov, I want to talk about him. The new Athletic article from Michael Russo and Joe Smith looking at the Minnesota Wild and their superstar player and the big extension that could be coming to make him either one of, if not the highest paid player in the game. I suspect that the one other contract that's expected to get done this summer that will likely surpass Kaprizov would be McDavid. But outside of McDavid, could Kaprizov be the second highest paid player in the league? It sure seems like it's a possibility. I know before now there's been a lot of speculation that they're going to offer somewhere around 8 times $15 million. I mean, that's a ridiculous contract, right? You're looking at $120 million over 8 years. But so far, negotiations have not really gone well. I don't know if you can say they're gone horrible. There's major concerns. I don't know if we want to go that extreme with it, but we have seen that we don't have an extension yet. Yet it's early. But we do know from these reporters at The Athletic that negotiations have reached a point where they're like, okay, we need to take a break. And they're basically putting everything on hold for right now. And they're probably not going to pick up negotiations again until Bill Guerin and Kirill Kaprizov both get back to Minnesota, probably sometime into late August, early September, closer to training camp. And it's expected that Guerin's going to try to attempt face-to-face conversations. I know they've said they want to make sure that, Kirill's getting all the information and understanding everything. Of course, you're always worried about a language barrier or anything of that nature. Is everything being relayed properly through the agent, that kind of stuff? But, if they're taking a breather on negotiations this early into it, that to me signals that there could be a big gap. And the question that they're mainly looking at in this article is, well, what if they have that face-to-face conversation and we get into training camp and he doesn't want to sign? I mean, we've heard about the 8 times 15, but has that actually been offered? If it has been and he hasn't accepted it yet, what's the problem? Because, the way they're looking at it is Kirill Kaprizov is a top 10 player in the NHL, highly skilled, one of the best in the league. The Minnesota Wild can't afford to lose him, and the problem here for negotiations is that it's fair to say that he and his agent would know that the team needs him a lot more than he needs them. So they're going to use that every possibility here in the negotiations to get as many pennies and dollars out of the Wild as possible, right? So that's going to be an issue. But if we get to the point where training camp is winding down and the season's ready to start and he's not willing to sign and they haven't made if they feel like there's still a big gap and he's not signing, or what if he decides he only wants a short-term, say 2-3 year contract, something like that, are they going to be in a situation where they really are going to be forced into looking at a trade? Now, it doesn't mean it's going to happen, but if you're going into the season and things have not moved and they're not progressing on that extension, you have to at least kind of start doing some due diligence, you would think. I mean, we've heard the owner himself say, nobody's going to offer more than us. We're not going to be outbid for Kirill Kaprizov. All we really need to do is show him the value that we want to win and make sure he's happy being a part of that. So it sounds easier said than done. If you think they would kind of go into this coming in pretty high. So if they, with negotiations being put on hold, it's just kind of caused some concern. And at what point do they have to look at it and say, yeesh, obviously, as much as they want to keep this guy, what is their ceiling? Because they obviously have to be worried as well. If we go too high, it's going to be that much more challenging to build the team around him. So that's going to be problematic as well. So again, we will see where things go on that front. So let me know your thoughts. What is the max the Wild would go to, and what point would you, if you're the GM, think, okay, we need to at least look at a trade and at least start doing some work on it just in case? Let me know. Now, of course, the other thing I want to take a look at here as well is there was a Montreal article from Habs Fanatic talking about a number 2 center possibility. Now, we already know from the fourthperiod.com, we've talked about it here before, on his latest trade bait board, Dave Pagnotta has made it known that the Blackhawks would be willing to move Lukas Reichel. So this article out of Montreal, based from a Habs fan perspective, thinks that Montreal should consider going after Lukas Reichel to solve their number 2 center spot. It's like, okay, well, you've already gone to Chicago one other time to get Kirby Dach. And that's, you still have Dach. He's battled injuries, which is a big part of the issue why things haven't worked out there. Do you want to go back to the well again? Or should you see really what you have internally first, maybe? I don't know what the right answer is to that. But ultimately, the article suggests that Reichel could be a good fit for this role, that the package offered would probably start with Mike Matheson, although the author then says that he feels Matheson has more value than Reichel, so it would have to be maybe Matheson for Reichel plus something, maybe a pick or another prospect or something else, whatever that might be. I can understand the Habs, because I've said it numerous times, I think if the Habs do trade Matheson, it likely would be in a deal for a number 2 centerman. I don't know that Reichel is really any better than what you have internally, though. So to me, I don't see that as a great solution. I don't know, because to me, if I'm moving Mike Matheson or any other assets for a number 2 center, to me, I'd want somebody more established. I'd want somebody that's a little bit more of a sure thing. Somebody that's just a little bit older, has had at least a couple of decent NHL seasons, so it's not such a gamble. You've already taken a gamble moving good assets for a player that you thought was going to be that player in Dach, and so far hasn't been. But there's still a chance he could be. And if he turns out to be that guy, well, then all is not lost. Maybe you don't need to make a move after all. Sometimes the best moves you make as a GM are the ones that you don't make, and you don't panic trade or, get ahead of yourself. So if I'm Montreal, I don't know about Lukas Reichel. I can understand the fact that he's a younger player, so he could grow with the team. He does have some talent, obviously. Maybe there's a chance he could be a decent fit there. I just don't see him right now being a better option than what you already have. So I would probably be willing right now, if I'm Montreal, to not make that trade, to go into the season, see how things work out. And if it's not working out with Doc, then I'm starting to explore options probably, into, November, December, before Christmas, to try to get ahead of things so I can have somebody intact for, a little bit more than half a year. So if they can make the playoffs, they're well accustomed to the team and kind of rolling along at that point instead of a late season trade edition, especially where you have the Olympic break this year and everything. It's going to be like last year. You're going to have a big break for 4 nations, except this year it's the Olympics. And then you're going to come back and it's going to be a short window before the trade deadline. And, it's going to be tricky, right? So I think teams are you're probably going to see a lot of moves kind of spaced out a little bit ahead of the Olympic Games, would be my guess. But let me know what you think on that in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.